Here comes the nasty girl.
Send a priest to save my soul, forget it.
Hey, this is Jake. I was your storyteller.
Hey everyone, this is Dan, and I was playing Silas Keene.
Hey folks, it's John, and I was playing Noah Fashnacht.
Hey, it's Ryan. I was Les Kershaw.
This is Josh. I was in a living being named Kingsley Burke IV.
And I'm Matt. I still feel like I have a little bit of Benton Beauclair in me.
That's what she said.
Everyone should have a little bit of voodoo, in them, I think.
And that knowledge is never going away anymore.
Nice. Well, John, this was your idea, doing a Q&A.
Yeah, so I figured that we'd reach out to our fans, our many fans on our various platforms of social media and ask them questions about Dark Light. What?
It was kind of our 1 week intern's idea.
That's right.
True.
Yeah.
You executed it.
executed.
It was our intern's
Shout out
idea.
to Dante.
Yeah.
1 week intern. Sent back to England.
Yep.
Didn't make it.
No work visa.
Visa didn't come through.
Maybe next summer.
Yeah, after he's out of law school.
But yeah, we reached out on various social medias looking for questions about the arc and Nastygram in general. And you all provided a bevy of questions that we can go through. And the first one here is from Brian on Facebook. And it's to Jake. Was there a story, historical event, novella that served as the inspiration for the story for you? Or was it more of an original that he created knowing the Civil War and Reconstruction America would serve as a great backdrop?
I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit in our wrap up, so I'll try not to be too repetitive. But there was a short story that I read by H.P. Lovecraft called The Alchemist, which was sort of the inspiration for the idea of the family curse and kind of knowing when you're going to die. The reason that I went with the Civil War and that time period, I actually am not a historian. And, you know, it's tough being at a table with Josh and John in particular, who really get into history and stuff like that. But so I had to do a lot of research on that. But the reason I kind of like that time period and I thought it fit well with Marlowe's story is because I feel like it's this time period when quote unquote great men are sort of like there's a mythology about them almost, right? Like there's these historic figures that like we make seem so much grander. And, you know, it kind of got me thinking about like, well, what makes them so great? Are they just kind of in the right place at the right time? Or is it like, you know, because they come from these rich families, they sign a deal with the devil, you know, like,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much it.
A lot less cell phones in the 1800s.
That's a big thing too. I mean, I do love the fact that you can put people in a remote mountain town and they can't just call an Uber. Yeah, that's a plus.
All right. The next one comes from Peter on Facebook as well. And if you're not on our Facebook lounge, our old private lounge where you can hang out and chat about all things Nastygram, come hop on.
Nastygram RPG Lounge.
Yes.
I feel like at all times it's the Cantina music from Star Wars. It's playing in our lounge.
If it were my
wretched
space,
hive.
it would be.
It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy, that's for sure. Peter from Facebook asks, what is something that you all really enjoy about the vampire system? I haven't played Vampire since the early 2000s, so I'm not sure how much has changed since then. If a lot has changed, what do you wish had not?
I think one of the things that we really enjoy about this system, something that we've brought up before, is the skill rolls, the proficiency checks, because we've played a lot of different systems where they're not so great, and your ability to blend them with situationally with your abilities versus the actual skills that you have is a really flexible and dynamic system, which I think allows people to shine. And also, I think is cool, Jake, you'd sometimes put the onus on us to describe how we accomplish something as to dictate, you know, what role we're going to make. which is another cool feature of it.
And I think the difference between old and new is that they did a pretty good job of streamlining the things that were overly complicated for no real reason, but also added, well, it's tough for us to say because we didn't play actual Vampire, which has a lot more rules on top of it for being a vampire. But I feel like the things they did really serve the story that they added complexity to in the new version, whereas they stripped away some of the things that were a bit more overly complicated, like White Wolf.
Yeah, this kind of actually feeds into some of the other questions, but I'll admit I didn't read a whole lot of the rules on how vampires work in this system because I didn't expect to have vampires in other than an NPC, and I didn't think that.
Everyone's staring at Josh right now.
Oh yeah.
So
Awkward.
it's possible that we got some of those rules wrong because I kind of hastily had to read about how like hunger works and everything. But the hunger mechanic is a really cool mechanic. It's one of those things we always talked about. Dice mechanics that add to the story are so cool, and that is exactly what that's designed to do. It's like when you have a failure on the hunger or an epic success on the hunger, it is going to push the story in a new direction, and that's really neat. So maybe someday we'll play Vampire, and that'll be a cool thing to explore.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Matt or Ryan?
I mean, I hate to join on the bandwagon with Dan because I'm not a fan of agreeing with Dan. But yeah, it's just the way that you can blend the skills gives so much more variety of what you can do as opposed to a lot of other systems where it's just very much like, well, it's this, roll this. I don't really have that. Like, so it makes it a lot easier. And this is my first experience with Vampire, so I don't really have any reference point. But I really like the way that plays.
I mean, yeah, it does seem like with the vampire rule system, I mean, the primary limit, at least as we played it, was your imagination. I mean, and how you're going to do stuff. The dice rolls are to just kind of add story and enhance things, and they don't feel limiting at all, which they can, I think, in some other systems.
I think that's the key point right there is it doesn't feel limiting. I think that's the number one thing about the system. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, though, to think about it in the sense that we were all, for the most part, on a level playing field. Whereas I guess in other games or even in Vampire, you're going to encounter things much greater than you or, you're much greater than them. And that's where the power dynamic comes in. I think maybe being on an all even playing field just allowed a lot of the rules, so to speak, or the numbers fade into the background.
The thing I like is, going off, Ryan just said, like, the rules don't get in the way. But in a way, even though the rules are very simple, there's more attributes. There's more skills. And actually, don't even remember. Like, they're called attributes and abilities, I think.
Yeah, I think
but you have 9 attributes instead of 6 in D&D because charisma...
it's such a broad...
that's so much made for a game that, like... You're generally just attacking shit and like occasionally doing social shit, but manipulation, persuasion, your appearance, those are so different in any actual person. And your abilities, I mean, there's got to be 30, 40
like
in this game, which is probably cut down from old Vampire, but still so much more than a D&D style game. And yet it doesn't get in the way. It enables you to make it more specific to a given character. And then on the downside, I do think, and this might be relative, which I think John touched on, to the fact that we weren't playing vampires, is that it might almost be too stripped down when it comes to combat and conflicts. Like sometimes like the one rule that's everything might be a little overly simplistic when it's like you're shooting... Like 2 people are shooting at each other, like those are kind of different things. Like it's not really, it shouldn't come down to who's the better shot. Like, like maybe somebody's a little bit more shifty and can cover a little bit better. 2 people are in melee. But overall.
Yeah, I think if you were playing a longer campaign and you were into more of that nitty gritty fighting, you definitely want to define some more things. Whereas I think for a more condensed arc like we played, it worked pretty well.
I'll tell you one thing that I had considered doing for a minute, and part of me was like, No, that's going to be like way too big of a side tangent, but I was considering having all of you be part of the flashback and giving you D&D characters.
Oh yeah.
That would have been fucking dope.
That would have been amazing.
Awesome. So Peter also asks, what was the most challenging thing for Jake to resolve / integrate into the story as a GM this season?
I kind of feel like I dropped the ball on the bonds and what did we call them? Bonds.
Yeah,
bonds. Yeah. That was hard to juggle. Like, trying to, I had mentioned this is a game that had more notes and NPCs and stuff like that than any other. And it was hard to also keep track of all your kind of bonds and stuff like that. Which is why there were a lot of times where I was just kind of like, yeah, take a point of willpower. I probably should have given you 4 in the last like 2 sessions. You know what I mean? From like all the role playing. So, I mean, hopefully that helped you guys to play your characters, but I don't think I used the mechanics of the bonds the way that I had envisioned it. So that from like a kind of a rules perspective was difficult to do. And one thing that was a challenge, but I think it ended up working, was I really wanted to make sure all of your backgrounds were part of the game. And that was tough. The one I actually was most afraid I wasn't going to be able to integrate was Ryan's, and it ended up being the most significant. Yeah.
That's awesome.
How about you guys? I think there's a follow-up.
Yes. The follow-up is for the other player, or for players other than Josh. Would your characters have taken the opportunity to become a vampire had it been offered? I don't think Noah would have been acquiesced to that request there to become a vampire. I think it's a bit too beyond the pale for him.
No pun intended.
Yeah, good. That's a good one.
I don't think Benton would have either. I mean, he was, in a way, he's a religious man. Like, he's not voodoo. Voodoo is his religion. It's not, it's not really about demons and devils and that kind of stuff. It's not really a dark magic kind of thing. So he was, the way it ends is he joins Noah and it's like, yeah, let's work together because this is kind of fucked.
Yeah, Les probably would have.
If you're going to be the demon.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Silas, it might have been dependent on the context.
Bro, you're doing blood magic.
That's what I mean. Like, does he take the clearly the more like wizardly path, or does he go Tremere vampire? What does he do? But I think he's definitely involved with the occult. It might have been the context of the offer, which I think was really cool. Like, a lot of times when we played vampire in the past, you started out as a vampire and you'd kind of create the background for it, but watching it actually play out, that was one of my more enjoyable scenes in the story was that, which I think we'll get to later. But
So if you're into sports betting, the over-under is 2.5 vampires.
I think it makes it compelling to have these flashback scenes. If we were to play vampire, it would be really cool to have flashback scenes of how you became a vampire and just get that character development in there. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Awesome. Andrew on Facebook asks, so my questions generally are quite fictional. What kind of setup do you... Functional. Sorry. Fictional. I can read.
Fake news.
What kind of setup do you use to record your session? Is everyone at the table with their own microphone? Do you use some kind of Uber mic where you can pick everything up?
Tape decks.
Yeah, tape decks. I guess we can answer that quick. We all have our own mics. Josh went mad and bought a bunch of awesome mics and awesome equipment. Set it all up. It's quite the setup here.
I think there's some pictures of that on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'll get a quick nerd aside if you not interested in this, just fast forward like twice. But we use so there are 5. We can support up to 5 players local. Matt is remote. Matt uses a USB mic. What is that? A ATR?
Yeah,
2100 with a nice pop filter, but no other mix or anything like that. He's straight into the computer.
Raw dogging it.
The rest of us, we use a mix. We have a Shure One Rode. What is this thing? A fucking
C1 or something.
ZX9er 54 ZB11.
Use one Rode NT1 and then 3 Rode pod mics. And then every one local feeds into a DBX mic preprocessor, which does a lot of the heavy lifting as far as audio quality and evening things out with different mics and different voices. And then run into a Focusrite digital mixer. And then we do all the recording and editing in Adobe Audition. So basically, we record everything locally. We also record Matt's audio remotely, which we almost never have to use unless there's an issue. Matt records his own track. He sends the track to us, and then we edit it all together.
Simple stuff.
Easy peasy.
The only weakness we have is fire trucks.
And then, and the gates work really well, except for sirens. And then I think there was one time on Into the Storm that Jake had to do a few sessions remotely when we were extra COVID-y, and you had a little pregnant lady at home.
No, it was the first episode or the second episode
One
of
Shot.
of One Shot a Month.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and that answers the third question there about virtual players. Yeah, Matt's been remote the entire time, and occasionally, or once or twice, Jake's been remote. And then in the editing, how much content gets cut out, or are there sessions we hear quite faithful to what actually happens around the table?
We are flawless.
Yeah, we never mix up or.
I mean, I'll talk to the editing in that it's every session is 99% of spoken words you hear on the final recording. Most of the editing is cutting out a delay here, cut out some of the ums, but not too many to make it inauthentic, cut out some clicks and whatnot.
Ethnic slurs.
Some cut moments. You're not wrong. But yeah, in general, I think one of our main intentions is to make this sound just like a session around the table sounds, maybe a little bit tighter.
It's funny. I actually saw a post on this recently that was asking players how their expectations of what playing D&D were like versus what they heard on actual play podcasts. And a lot of them is talking about how long it takes and like dice rolling and all that stuff, which on podcasts, that's what you make, those are the little things you snip in order to keep the pace going. But I always find that around the table, usually the flow seems the pace seems fine. It's just from an auditory perspective. You want to just keep it going, snapping along.
Every once in a while, there'll be like either an audio issue or we'll do like a rules lookup that takes a couple minutes or, every time we roll initiative, the initiative never happens that fast. But in general, you're hearing how it sounds around the table.
Andrew has, I'm not sure there's a question in this, but possible spoilers below. I hope you're not listening to this after before you listen to the final part of Dark Legacy. But
hey, some people are chaotic.
True. Early on in the arc, I was guessing the overall plot was that the Marlowe family tree was the generational breeding ground for the Ventrue clan of vampires. That at the 50th birthday, the death of the heir would be faked and the heir would be embraced into the clan and whisked away to some other part of the world.
See?
There it is.
We got to leave that siren.
Yeah.
We gotta do it.
Yeah.
They'll never believe us.
We have a vulnerability.
This is what you don't hear. Is exciting, isn't it?
It's going to be great because they just aren't going to be able to hear a siren and we're going to be talking about it. Where was I? Into the clan and whisked away to some other part of the world with a new identity. I actually quite liked the direction it went and enjoyed being surprised. Which is that sounds like a really fun game. Let's play that one.
Right. All right. It's not a question, but I guess the question to Jake would be: if a player had mentioned that as a theory, would you have taken it and run with it?
I would have thought about it for sure. Kind of like I seriously was like, do I need a pterodactyl in the woods? I don't know.
And he said, fave moments for me. Kingsley's descent into darkness was nicely played as well. At descent into darkness, he was a politician. I mean, he started pretty.
He's
well.
already there.
It was more of a lateral move.
It was a pivot. It was a pivot.
As well as Marlowe's mother being dramatically coy to Lydia, Marlowe's wife. Can't keep names straight. Fish drying lines will no doubt be something you'll always come back to forevermore. Always about
It's my solid contribution to the game.
Tim from Instagram and Michael from Facebook had a similar question. Who's the girl that messed with Benton's voodoo magic circle thing near the house, and who they're working for?
Who wants to answer that one? I'm just kidding. So that was supposed to be the children, one of the daughters. So I had kind of had this idea early on, and that was pretty early on, that you guys were going to get a lot more information from the children. I don't know. I guess I should have thought about the players at the table and the fact that they wouldn't go talk to a bunch of children. But I had this idea of like the children kind of knowing that something had happened to their mother, that she wasn't quite normal, and you know, kind of being a little bit in on it, like creepy little kids who know their mom is some sort of vampire. And they see these kind of arcane runes and they think like, no, mom probably wouldn't like this. But it turned out you guys didn't kind of encounter the whole family until later, I think.
Yeah,
so it just didn't work out that way.
We only really met the children like when we went into the basement with them, which
last
week
doesn't sound
weird at all.
I mean, I did get the opportunity there to kind of like have them help you a little bit. But I had imagined that happening a lot sooner and involving just some clues that would push you towards suspecting Lydia.
And Michael kind of follows up with some of that, asking how much time Matt spends preparing and researching the background info for your character or for characters.
For Benton, this one was quite a bit, probably close to like 10 hours, like 5 of that just spent watching episodes of Swamp People and trying to figure out how to speak with a Cajun accent. And the rest was a lot of like voodoo, just looking into the actual voodoo religion and the history of it in the time period and how that would have, you know, realistically worked. Because, you know, though I'm not a religious person, like voodoo is a real religion, and I'm not trying to step on anything by making a bunch of shit up. Even though I probably took some liberties, and if anybody who is actually into voodoo heard that, you know, please don't make a voodoo doll out of me. But on the whole, definitely like I don't feel like I spend any more time than like Dan. Dan has
but here's
your stuff actually comes up.
Yeah,
in
that's what
story,
I was going to say.
and
Matt,
Dan's stuff never.
One of the things that I really admired about your character in this arc was interjecting like the history and the, you know, the behavior and the involvement of all the voodoo without it muddying up the game. You know, like it always seemed seamless when you brought it up and when you used it in the game, which I think is really cool, because I think it can be really clumsy to bring in kind of things that aren't necessarily involved with the storyline. But I think you did an amazing job of it.
I think Matt does the best job with character prep when all the characters, I mean, even the doctor you played, you know, your research was part hanging out with white people, but then dude, like you were always busting out like medical terms. And then when, in one shot, I mean, whether it was specific influences, you know, Nordic stuff, like you made it sound really authentic, but again, a part of the game, not like I need to shoehorn my background in. And then in Into the Storm, I think you just used most of your drug background.
Personal experience there.
Lifetime experience.
I mean, that was also, you know, that character, Kyle Black.
Kyle Black.
It was Tenacious D. Like that was supposed to just be Jack Black and Kyle Gass smashed together. But I feel like especially with this one, it was really easy to just use that voodoo stuff because it was this like occult weird thing happening that was like kind of unexplainable. It was like, well, it's going to be really easy to like throw some stuff out there that you guys aren't going to really have any idea on. Also, I feel like I do have an advantage being remote as I have 2 computer screens in front of me. So like for the Dr. Vilfug, like I just pulled up like medical charts online and we're looking at like pictures of a cranium to come up with the words on like where I would enter through the skull and like that kind of stuff. So I think being remote definitely has its like disadvantages, but being able to like research and have a ton of information at my fingertips whenever I need it is huge.
When we build Recording Studio 2.0, we'll all have.
Everybody has a workstation.
Everyone has a workstation.
Just a bunch of cubicles.
You don't actually look.
We don't actually hang out. We just
And the cubes, yeah.
Facing away.
I think someone else asked as well. So, but I think you guys all kind of did a lot of research on your characters for this game. Like, it's just that most of you, it was things that didn't actually come up in game.
Yeah.
Like, I know Ryan learned a lot about Mormons.
I learned a lot about a lot about Utah history, a lot about the Pony Express. Yeah, did not pick as cool of a thing to yeah.
There's a question in here about that. Just wait.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what's cooler than the Swiss independence and how the Catholics and the Protestants fought?
Sure. If you're Swiss.
If you're Swiss. Cool. Tim also had a couple of other questions. If any of you characters were able to play the role of a different player, who would you choose? Josh?
Oh, cool. I'm glad to go first because I would definitely say Matt's character, Benton. I think Matt has a tendency to play characters that are at an end of a spectrum. And I don't mean like an extreme, like a caricature. I just mean that a lot of times, in a party, you'll have people that have kind of a middle ground and then people that are outliers. And, there's sometimes playing the outlier can be more interesting. I think Kingsley was kind of one outlier in this one.
He was the other end.
He was the other end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think naturally I would gravitate towards like the opposite end of the spectrum, which would be somebody that was really into this and understanding and having a foot in the door in this world, beyond just the voodoo stuff and everything, just that idea of already having insight into this, beyond the veil, whatever you want to call it, and being able to add those pieces to the story. So I would be Benton.
Ryan?
I think I would. I mean, I think you all kicked ass with your character, so I definitely wouldn't want to take over anyone's character. But if I had to go with a different route again, it'd probably be a Kingsley route, just because again, it'd be very different from Les. The other, I had two. I don't know if I mentioned this in the other one, but yeah, I had two character concepts, and the one I didn't go with was a lot more similar to Kingsley. It was going to be kind of like a pacifist and someone who's very, scientifically minded. So it would have been kind of like, again, Dana sculling a bunch of this stuff. So.
And Josh, I think you had a second concept that was actually a lot more similar to Benton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you ended up not going with it because Matt was going with Benton, and you're like, oh, that's too similar.
Okay, I have one black guy.
Can only be one token black guy.
I think if I had to pick, I liked Les's background. I think that would have been fun to play with having that kind of second mind inside of you, second spirit. That was a cool background, and having that connection to the Marlowe family would have been interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think I want to second that with Les's concept. It would be interesting because, to Jake's point, you were worried about whether or not you could get it in. I don't know how much. Yeah, I got that. That was a silent one. I don't know, Ryan. Like, if you were trying to pick an opportunity to bring it up earlier, or whether you were just leaving it up to Jake to introduce it at another time. But it would be an interesting concept if it were brought up earlier in the game, which because we had a lot of the first half to 2/3 of the game was always trying to discover whether or not what we were being confronted was real, right? That's Kingsley's kind of foil to a lot of that stuff. And then having someone with another person inside them would have probably been a lot of conflict there.
Yeah, I think I would have either gone with Les or Silas. Like I like the idea. I think out of everybody, I think I like Ryan's story arc the best. Like I like how it never, his character never really, like, he had his goal of protecting Marlowe, and like he carried it through all the way to the end. Like, I really liked the way that worked, but I also I liked the science-y element of Dan's character. The photographer spy, I think that would have been really cool to play. But I mean, I really do said I still, like, in my head, I talk in a Cajun accent sometimes when I'm like doing shit around the house now. Like, Benton is us stuck in there forever.
But then we don't see a Lord of War, a Swiss Lord of War, right? Played by Nick Cage.
Doing a Swiss accent would be far too difficult.
Was that who you picked? I forgot that.
No.
no.
I'm just thinking about the
I
movie.
I was actually gonna say that I if I had been playing, I think I would have gone with Noah. And I hadn't really thought of it until we were closing in on where the actual arc of the character started, but I liked the idea of him kind of coming to terms with, like, not wanting to be an arms dealer and wanting to kind of do something more in line with his faith. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. And you know, it's a role-playing challenge to play a character with faith like that too. And, and I like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
that would have been my choice.
One of the reasons why I gave him such strong faith is because I'm not. That's not me. So it's interesting to try to play in that space. Awesome. And last one from Tim here is: if any of you have taken the deal and escaped, what would you have done with your newfound power? What did Kingsley do with?
Well, this is a short one because Kingsley would have done the exact same thing he did in the After Effect, which is basically try to influence American politics.
Yep.
I do also want to just give a shout out to Tim because he is essentially our most involved Instagram follower. He always comments, always is out there on that in our terrible social media presence. So thanks, Tim.
Well, Les did take the deal, but what would you have done if you hadn't survived?
Les didn't think that far ahead. Absolutely not. And it worked out really well because I definitely missed the memo where we were supposed to be have an after kind of like, you know, the postscript as to what our character did. Afterwards, I was like, oh, well, it worked out well that I didn't make it out of there. But no, I mean, he's 100% like focused on just protecting Marlowe, and that was it for him at this point.
I see him like moving out west and just kind of like,
that's probably what it would have been, going back out west. Probably. Yeah. I mean,
kind of wandering on his own.
Yeah. High Plains Drifter.
Letting Wakara take over every once in a while. Yeah.
For Noah, I think it would have been the opposite of what happened, where his faith would be kind of abandoned to some extent, and he would become even more of a Lord of War, go back to Switzerland, sell arms and weapons, become influential in that. And
he'd be making rockets for the fucking Third Reich.
I mean, when World War I comes around, he'd probably be very involved in that one way or another.
Yeah. I think for Silas, he would have probably just kept pushing the kind of boundaries on the occult. I think that would have obviously fueled his kind of interest in it, being a part of it at that point. So I think he just would have continued to press that frontier, so to speak, if he had taken the deal.
I think he really would have started some boudoir photography trend too. Yeah.
The original Hustler.
X-ray photography.
That's right.
That's a tough one. I mean,
it's pretty antithetical kind of to your character.
Yeah. I mean, there was a moment in that when we were playing it out where it did cross my mind that Benton would accept the deal. But then as soon as he came back, he would have committed suicide. I was like, that's not really and then just, talking through that scene, it was kind of realized other people are going to accept this. So if he comes back, accepts it, comes back, others will too. So it doesn't really end that way. So yeah, I don't even think, I think if he accepted the deal, he would have tried to finish, end it before he got that power. It's
like that great scene in Fallen, right? Movie with Denzel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic scene.
Nice.
Good pull.
Awesome. So Mike on Facebook, he says, my question is more preparation oriented. These stories have always intrigued me. So well done. I've never really been part of a tabletop adventure, and hearing these made me wonder how long it takes to prepare a quest / who is involved. How long it takes? I mean, that's there's many answers to that depending on how long.
Do you know if he's talking about the whole story or just the characters?
Do you maybe want to read the whole thing?
Oh, is it?
I think
The
it's kind
second
of all
part
one.
is kind of part of the same question.
There are moments where it sounds like the party is aware of the story elements and also unaware of something, i.e. an ambush or twist. I know the DM, for example, is primarily involved, but is everyone involved partially in the mapping out of the journey, or is it mostly new to them at the time of play and based off of their decisions?
I think it varies a little bit from game to game, but it's very collaborative, right?
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of not necessarily input as to how the story starts, but it never. My favorite part about role playing is that it never goes exactly how it is in my mind, and it's always better because it's collaborative, right? For this game, as for the first part of the question, how long it takes to prepare, this game the timing was weird. So I kind of started coming up with this idea 15 months ago next week. And I know that because that is the age of my daughter. And I think that probably also had some impact on the actual game that we were playing, the idea of lineage and everything. But I had a lot of downtime from doing pretty much everything, of, being up in the middle of the night, feeding a baby, and just being home a lot, to kind of think the game over and plan it out. So for this game in particular, I spent more time preparing it and working on it than any game I've run in a long time. But I'm curious about you guys with some of the games you've run. How?
I mean, but what should be maybe included in there is the invisible work of 20 plus years of game mastering too. So there's just a level of, being familiar with the system, being familiar with the people around the table, and how you prepare. I think that's probably all goes into it too, right?
Yeah.
I think the part of the reason that he mentioned that sometimes it sounds like the party is aware of story elements. I think there's two things there. One is sometimes off mic, and I mentioned this in the recap, but I'll ask you guys at the end of the game, like, what do you want to do in the next game? And I don't tell you like what's going to happen, but I ask you like, where should we start? Like, and someone might say like, well, like I remember one, when John said he wants Noah to throw the gearbox off the thing. And I'm like, cool, we're going to start the next game with that scene. Like, I think that'll be a cool way to start, so like things like that, like the players are aware because it is their ideas, and it's usually things that they're going to do. And I think the other part of it is that because we've all role played together so long that sometimes it just clicks, and what someone else is kind of thinking or what they're going to say.
I'd say, just to add specifically, if you're wondering like what you hear on mic, the only time anything that we've ever released has ever been prepared by a player ahead of time are recaps. And occasionally, like when Jake was like, come up with something for what happens with your character after the game. But in game, like we might give him ideas like of what we think we want to do, but the actual, like how the game plays out and our reactions to it we don't script shit.
Yeah,
if that's part of the question.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I would actually, go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, even for like that voodoo scene, like the tarot card reading, like I'd mentioned to you that you wanted to do a tarot card
That's a good
reading,
example,
and like
yeah.
you created all of that and put all that information in, and like you didn't send me that information until it was happening in the game. So like I didn't know any of that prior. It just, like Dan said, all those time role playing is like we kind of get how to
that's
use
the perfect
that information.
I think that's the perfect
nasty
example,
gram.
Matt.
Yep.
Because you, at the end of the session, you said like, hey, I want to try this thing next game. And I said, okay, cool. And that was the end of the conversation. And then I kind of came up with a scene. And so it's both of ours, right? Like it's your idea. I'm writing it, and then you're essentially editing it, quote unquote, like in the game as we play it, right? And I think it was one of my favorite scenes. I don't know if that's a future question, but it was one of my favorite scenes in this game was when you guys did the tarot and Lydia came back in the room, and it was completely that part of her coming back in the room and flipping the cards was 100% on the spot. So I was very proud of that moment. Those are my proudest moments.
It's sort of a pro tip. Like think when you're writing stories and stuff and you're moving, like you want to create that initial
Pro tip.
Pro
So
tip.
humble.
Yeah. Right? If you want to write a story, you get it going, but leaning into that collaborative effort, players can provide you with the content that's important to them, which makes it more meaningful to them, and it gives you like a body of stuff to work with, and it allows you to have great scenes in an actual episode or a game that you're playing, because you've been able to. It's not all off the cuff. You can do some of it or a lot of it, but then you get to have like these really kind of either poignant moments or important moments that you've really kind of put a lot more planning into.
Yeah.
Quick shout out to Mikey, as I call him, Mikey Marinara. He has two podcasts, the Chips Groove podcast, which
That
is
was
a really
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, that's
It's a video game score review solo podcast, which he does an awesome job on. And then he does an X-Files podcast. This Is Not Happening, another X-Files podcast, which is a spiritual follower of a podcast I used to be involved with.
It's funny. I was actually talking to Levin's son, Sam, and I was asking him what his favorite music is, and it's all video game music.
Awesome.
Brittany from Facebook, it's kind of along the similar lines. As an aside, this arc was by far my favorite of all of them so far. Not sure how easily this can be answered, but so far Jake is my favorite GM DM.
Aw.
Well,
Fuck me, right? Yeah, right. fuck me, Brittany. You've heard two GMs. It's not like a multitude.
well, hopefully there'll be more variety in voices for the next couple.
Don't make sure you
next
just
arc.
don't skip any parts of this paragraph, okay?
As his games tend to have more twists and unexpected turn of events. Example, Dark Legacy, unexpected ending leading to 2-part episode and Into the Storm where everyone dies. I realize some of this comes down to how the player roles ultimately shake out, but I'm wondering if the GM has planned out a couple of alternate possibilities and how you ultimately map the game to keep things moving logically. Is it on the spot creative thinking?
We kind of touched on that in the last one a little bit, but I got to give you guys the credit because it is, like I keep saying, it's super collaborative, right? Like I think a lot of the coolest moments come out of you guys doing things that I didn't expect, and then it spurs these off the cuff things. So, what might start as a planned out sort of story arc with a few twists ends up being even more twisted because, and this is a great example, this arc, I didn't think you were going to fight the devil. I didn't think we were going to have that 2-part episode at the end.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be 10 episodes. So yeah, it's everyone, right? That's kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah.
So humble.
Yeah, right.
That's why he's the favorite.
But to compare and contrast, like I will prep a game.
I like to ask Brittany who her second favorite.
Well, hold on to that until the end of the next arc. Then it might be you can rank them.
Oh yeah. That's
But
exciting.
I will see Jake's from afar. I'm not reading them, but I'll see Jake's notes for a game, and it's like 7 sentences on a piece of paper.
It's all up here. It's
I will
all up in
have
the brain.
8 pages with checklists that I go through. With
little flow charts.
But I tend to or I write things down, but then I don't bring it with me because that distracts me, and I end up just trying to look through notes. I learned a long time ago in DMing that if I can write things down so that I can commit them to memory,
sure.
But I'm better if I don't have that in front of me. So in general, all I want in front of me is names and dates if dates are important.
Awesome. kind of goes into what I think is probably the biggest curveball. But Jesse from Facebook asks, what was the biggest curveball that the players threw at Jake this arc? I assume it was the fact that we wanted to fight the devil.
Sure. Yeah, it was the final 2 episodes. It was also Ryan not going into the memory thing, which ended up working out great and not being a problem. But in my mind, the most likely way that I saw this game ending was the tragedy of Ryan having to kill the person who he kind of loved the most. Because that's so World of Dark, so dark. The other option that I didn't mention in the wrap up that I had kind of tried to lay out there for you guys was the possibility of making a deal with the devil by using the dagger. So in the flashback scene, I made sure to have that Harold explain how to use it to summon him.
Yeah.
But I intentionally didn't want to play out that scene in a flashback of the original Marlowe summoning the devil and making the deal because I didn't want to do it twice. So if you guys chose to do that, I didn't want to like play through that scene twice. Because I thought like, oh, one of these clever assholes is going to be like, why don't we use the dagger and summon the devil, make a deal?
That always goes well.
Yeah.
It kinda goes in
you kind of did that, just in a different way.
Yeah.
Kind of goes in the second part of the question. Did you have to scramble to come up with the solution that wouldn't derail things, or was it easy to work all these decisions into the story?
So, and this actually plays into Brittany's question a little bit too. And so a little behind the scenes with our scheduling, we alternate weeks of what game we play. So one week we'll play my game and then we'll play another game that we're recording. We go back and forth, which means that I get 2 weeks between games. And that for this arc was super useful because most of the games ended with me not really knowing where the next game was going to go. And I'll tell you, after 1 week, I usually still didn't know. And then for the most part, within that second week, it would kind of click and I'd be like, oh, this is it. Because, I would go to bed literally every night thinking, how am I going to run the next game? So with 2 weeks, it's the right amount of time for this campaign to figure it out.
Awesome. So last but not least is our buddy Kevin from Game Night Heroes. Great podcast. You should head over there and check them out. It was from via text, I think.
DM.
DM.
Ooh, could we call it a nastygram?
He sent us a nastygram. He said a couple questions. First off, was there any specific character moments that any of you had planned that didn't come to fruition? Let's start with Dan. 'Cause I think there's probably a couple.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. When we were originally coming up with the character, and I was talking to Jake about it some, I thought there would be more of my kind of occult discovery, and I think we talked about this a little in the wrap up. My involvement of studying the occult or figuring things out was going to be through my photography, but I think in hindsight, I'm glad it didn't happen that way because I like the way Matt's character fulfilled that role in our kind of group dynamics. So I can't think of anything really off the top of my head that I wish had been a whole lot different.
The photography.
Yeah, it's a little more.
Did you take a picture?
Yeah,
In the last episode.
In the last episode.
yeah.
My equipment was back in the train.
Yeah.
For Noah, nothing I really had planned. I mean, wielding the Gatling gun probably would have been pretty cool.
I did have like a dream ending of us riding off on a train with a Gatling gun on the caboose. Yeah.
But like his background, his skill set didn't really necessarily come into play, and it's tough to play a character that is like a machinist and a crafter in any role playing game.
I feel like some of that skill set came into play
Some of
with
it, yeah.
every gunshot.
Yeah.
Well,
But
that's
the machinist part.
Yeah.
If I can butt in there, that reminded me, John, like that was a big curveball, actually. You guys destroying all the stuff that you had been like dominated into bringing. Because I kind of had this idea of you guys like laying down some serious hell and murdering lots of people and then feeling really bad about it when you realized like Are we the baddies? Are we the baddies was sort of like an underlying theme of the game, right? And the Gatling gun would have really helped make you baddies.
Really put that into the.
solidified that status.
How about you, Ryan?
I mean, I still did murder a bunch of people. I'm going to throw that right out there. And that is one of, I think I did say at one point that when we were going to the church, that my character's goal was to barricade it and burn the church down.
right.
And that would have solved the problem. Would have been good. But no, I mean, there wasn't, I think I plan out a lot less than some of you guys for this stuff. And I thought Jake did a great job with Wakara and what I gave him for that. But it was pretty much like I just like to give the GMs a lot of time just like a little hook to work with, because I kind of don't. I like to be surprised with what happens to my character a lot of the times too.
Yeah, that can be fun.
Yeah. So, and I really did like how that ended up working out. So
I forget that sometimes with you, like, you'll throw out this idea, and like sometimes as a game master, you don't want to tread on someone's idea. You don't want to turn it into something they didn't want it to be.
You're talking about Dan's 8 like, no, that's not how this goes.
That's not how my history
If you
works.
see chapter 2.
No, my great grandfather is a gold dragon, not a silver dragon.
Don't fuck it up. This shit matters.
But I do worry about treading on people's kind of character concepts and changing them in ways that they didn't want them to. And I was a little worried about that with yours. I was like, and I had asked you a few times, I'm like, so Wakara, can you like talk to him? Like, does he like manifest physically, and you're kind of like, sure. Go for it. I kind of wish I had done, I actually really liked the scene where you saw him in the dining room, like preparing his weapons. And I wish I had done a couple scenes like that earlier in the game where you had physically seen him and talked to him. Yeah.
How about you, Josh, for Kingsley?
I think the one that comes most to mind is I wanted to bring his brother into the story more. He, like in the session 0 and my own kind of like wrapping my head around this character, his brother and who he was as they grew up and their dynamic, and then what happened to him in the war was probably the single most significant thing of what made Kingsley. And I tried to kind of bring it up in the story, and I think it did, and it was fine. So it's not like a regret. I don't think we missed anything there, but like I do maybe wish with the supernatural shit, even if it was faked, that like maybe that like maybe the devil appearing to him as his brother or something like that. I think I really was trying to kind of shoehorn that in.
Well, and I was just about to say that's the balance that you're always trying to make as a character is, interjecting enough of your history to inform your character.
Yeah.
And like kind of flush out what you've already created versus moving the story along with that, which is what we were talking about earlier when Matt was doing that really well with the voodoo stuff.
Yeah.
How about you, Matt? Anything Benton was planning?
No, he got everything. And that was pretty much just like the original concept was he was an army cook and he got to make breakfast. So that was a win.
Check.
Yeah. Like that whole tarot thing was on the spot. So, but yeah, kind of Josh just mentioning it. Like I kind of wish maybe Benton had tried to play a little bit more of a role with that Charlie contact. That could have been a really cool angle, and it's a good chance that would have changed a lot of the story arc. So I don't know if I necessarily would have wanted to change it because I really liked the way the story went. But yeah.
I just wish I brought line with me to make fish lines.
Kevin also asked, what made you decide to run a World of Darkness Hunter style game using rules specific for playing game using rules specific for playing as vampires? Was this hard to adapt?
I looked at the systems that I kind of own and know, and it kind of came down to either World of Darkness or what's it called?
Monster of the Week.
Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Josh, we had talked about this a little bit And ultimately, the reason I didn't go with Monster of the Week is because so many of the classes have a lot of magic and stuff like that. And I wanted the game to be more grounded. The other thing was I didn't actually realize that the New World of Darkness didn't have rules for mortals.
Yeah.
Because all the other editions have had rules to just make your character immortal. And this one, no, it really didn't. I had to make up a couple things. But I wanted a system that allowed people to make flexible characters. So not a class-based system. I wanted lots of skills because I knew it was going to be a skill-heavy game. And I wanted combat to be quick and deadly. And I think it worked.
And I think adapting it wasn't necessarily too difficult. Is basically stripping out all the vampire stuff and maybe adding a couple of extras for being mortals and having fears and stuff.
Yeah, and like I said before, I started working on this game at a point where I had a lot of free time, actually. So I had time to sit down and made you guys like a little Word document on making a mortal. I made the mortal character sheet. I made up a couple rules. So it wasn't hard.
Kevin also asks, what was your favorite moment from another player?
And probably wrap that in 4 right together.
And also, what was your favorite moment that you yourself got to do? For me, the favorite moment was making the decision that he wasn't going to trust his past self and tossing that gearbox into the valley. I made that pretty quickly because the idea that someone else had told him without him remembering to bring this massive weapon of war was exceedingly distressing to Noah. And that was a cool scene that it ended up being. Favorite moment from another player. I mean, it has to be the tarot card reading was just awesome. That was an awesome scene. And Benton's character, from start to finish was an awesome character. How about you, Ryan?
And I had so many favorite moments in this game. For myself, I mean the insane run of rolls I had throughout this entire campaign.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, like I think I hit on like 80% on what should be 50-50 dice rolls. So it was it just. Yeah,
slaying it.
Sometimes it feels good to crush.
Yeah, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna. This is ridiculous. At the end,
had Ryan made a bargain with the devil out of this game?
I made it before.
Your worst roll of the game was the roll that you wanted to roll bad on.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the tarot card was great. I actually had some. I think it was one of the stranger moments in the game, but I got some real joy out of the long discussion of cargo manifests. Like the back and forth there was just
You're the only one.
Yeah. Josh and I got into it deep
down. I mean, it seemed very like real and in character. Like, it just seemed like what you guys would have done. I don't know.
How about you, Josh?
I guess it's pretty obvious, but I guess my favorite moment probably was the interactions with Lydia. I enjoyed, Kingsley was a coward, and I liked that moment as an opportunity to sort of lean into being a coward, but also give it a path forward beyond that, where he can, overcome that in a way.
Yeah.
So he's being true to his nature. As a coward and opportunist, but then enable character growth, even if it's in a weird way. And I think there's a lot of good ones, but for another character, I think also because, I think 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the arc, up till the final 3-4 episodes, I don't think we knew how pivotal Les was going to be in the story. Not that he wasn't a good or an important character, but that final moment where he gets to the door and Ryan, not just Ryan, but Les inside of this somewhat possessed character wants to fail, wants to be caught, wants Wakara to kill him. I think that arc of Les, the loyalty, and then taking the deal and then ultimately like not really wanting to let the devil escape, but just wanting to protect Marlowe. I think that was really rewarding and really well done in a very tight and unexpected and unplanned way.
Yeah.
100%. That's definitely my favorite of Ryan's arc. I mean, I feel like this game in particular, like I think this is probably one of the better ones that we did. We all had so many great storytelling moments with Kingsley's acceptance of Lydia, Dan, just the way that you played Silas's like past trauma, in the scene of the coal fire, when like the way you played the reflection with all of that and like like that was really cool. I love the way that you did that. John, I think I liked the way that your story ended as well. Like your sort of the whole time you were like faithful, but also kind of like denying that there was like that you weren't on the right side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you were like, no, doesn't really matter if they're with God, but like they're with the wrong God. Like what, you know what I mean? Like I really like the way that happened. For myself, I mean, I just had so much fun with Benton that like anytime I got to do some cool voodoo stuff was like the rituals, the prayers, even the little stuff that I tried to do, it was so much fun to be that. I think I felt the freest I've been in a while with that character. Nice.
And Dan, how about you?
Yeah, I think one of my character's like favorite scenes would have been the reflection moment in the factory. It was just an opportunity to lean into some of the background stuff we had discussed, and it was one of the first scenes too that we really had a connection or like a interaction with something that was clearly other, right? There were the handprints, but that was very much other. So it was a very exciting moment for my character. And then in general, I think I'd also, I'd go back to the dream sequence, or the flashback sequence, the whole thing of that parallel moment between, the people back at Marlowe's, and us in the past, bringing forth the history and the explanation of the moment that was happening at present. That's just like that's amazing storytelling on Jake's part. It's a great way to run splitting up the party too, right?
And kind of to answer an earlier question, because I didn't get to do this, but for you guys that were part of that dream sequence, like that was off the cuff. Jake gave you character notes,
correct?
Right? Basically like motivation. So like you had no fucking idea what that scene was going to be like, or that scene existing going into the session. And then you and Matt had to, and Ryan didn't because he fucking bailed. But that's really cool.
I bailed to murder people, which is what I was good at.
And I got to give you guys props for that, because I had to trust you with revealing the history, know, like you have to get it right or you fuck up my whole game. But that's one of those situations where like, obviously I could never have planned for like the house is going to get attacked at the same time that I could, but I couldn't. Right. So like the week before I knew that it was an option, but going up to then, like I didn't know that you'd all be held up in the house and half of you would be at the church, like it just worked out to where during that kind of 2-week break, I kind of worked on it and I thought like, oh, this is amazing that the timing works where I can split the party and have this cool situation. So it all kind of falls together because of the choices you make. And then of course, because I put you guys on the spot to play other characters. And Matt, I got to give you props. I gave you a lot of heavy lifting because that wasn't the only time in this game. I mean, I gave you a ton of notes on the tarot thing. I made right off the bat in the first episode, I made you give this whole explanation at the tree about how they had to make a choice. That was pretty pivotal. And I think I warned you. I was like, Matt, might want to smoke a little less tonight.
Yeah. I mean, it never really felt like it was like, I don't know, work or difficult. It just felt so like natural in this setting and with how well you ran the game.
Yeah, for sure. Another question from Kevin. How did the design process for this game differ from your other arcs?
It's more of a mystery, so I had to do more work.
Yeah, that's always the way of it, right?
Mysteries can be much more challenging.
Yeah, because if I get something wrong, you guys are going to call me out, and then you're going to grab onto it, thinking it's a plot element, right?
Yeah.
So it was just more mapping out of events and timelines and stuff. Yeah,
And I guess in comparison to other arcs, I think Into the Storm and One Shot were both essentially stories, right? Like you don't know how the story's going to end, but they were somewhat linear stories.
Quests,
This was a mystery, and then I guess I'd say Empire's End was more of a setting.
Yeah.
It wasn't a pre-existing story per se, but like a setting. So I think like you start with a very simple, like what is going to ground this arc, like what is going to be about, and then beyond that, it's at some point they're all collaborative story building.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, to some extent it was the same sort of prep. It's here are all the NPCs, here's their motivations, and here's the things they're going to do. But there was a lot more prep of here of the things that they have done.
Yeah.
So that's where all the extra work came in. Usually that's not as important.
Yeah, you want to define where all the current state of affairs came from. How the players learn about that is all in the just the playing and rolling and what players actually want to do to figure it out. But yeah, you have to set all that in motion ahead of time, which probably makes Mystery one of the more difficult, time consuming games to run as a DM. At least front-wise prep for it. Awesome. So last question of the night. Kevin asks, what is your method for choosing the games that you play?
Yeah, sometimes you like to choose your own adventure.
Well played, sir.
Good segue.
Exactly. I mean, oftentimes it's what people are really passionate about running as a game, and then we kind of latch onto that. But what is for the actual podcast, I think, is a bit more.
I think the thing between the podcast and how we play that goes hand in hand is that I think in general, when we finish a game, or even if we're in a game and somebody's going to start something else, we want something different, whether it's a setting, a system, a different approach to it. And I think that works. I hope it works for a podcast too. And that, you get a story and then you get something different. And, I'm hoping that as an audience, you enjoy approaching games the way we do, which is you don't always want to hear or do the same thing. So to segue,
Yeah, right.
like the next game is something that, and there are times like behind the scenes where things are recorded simultaneously, or sometimes something is in advance and has to stop. We are generally recording at least two things at once. So, it was like this game wrapped up and we had another arc planned, which was kind of dark and, remains, in the future if we release it, but we wanted to do something different. So, the next thing you're going to hear, this choose your own adventure that Matt talked about, is super lighthearted, borderline silly.
Yeah.
D&D one-shot adventures, different DMs. Like how can we go as far from like a set, grounded, dark gothic mystery fucking choose your own adventure one-shot D&D
High
fantasy
magic, yeah.
We weren't even sure we were
nonsense.
going to release it. And then it's born out of our scheduling conflicts, which every D&D player understands.
But I think the reason that we're releasing it is like Josh said, and it's the way that we choose our games. It's because we love it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I love those one-shot choose your own adventure games way more than I thought I was gonna. I thought like, oh, here's something to do when someone has a scheduling conflict. You know, it's something to pass the time. I didn't think I would go back and listen to them and just enjoy them.
Be
as
so
much as I
invested
do.
in the characters you create for it.
Yeah, I mean, they're really fun. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that ends the Q&A portion of Dark Legacy. Kind of wraps up for Dark Legacy itself. Like they said, we're going to be releasing another arc coming next week, right?
Yeah.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
You'll hear the intro this same week.
Yep.
And then the first episode the next
Which
week.
is Dan's game.
Dan's game.
Dan's game.
Brittany can
Yikes
hear her
stripes.
second favorite dungeon master.
Oh, Brittany, bitch.
But we really appreciate you all sending questions our way. It was a bit of an experiment, but it turned out to be great. You guys, the questions were awesome, and it really had great discussion here. You can continue on the discussion on our Facebook page, also Twitter or Instagram. If you have any additional questions that popped up as a result of this, tag it onto the same thread, and we'll answer them in situ.
And the only thing I want to add to that is, the next game we play, it's set in this world, and I think Dan mentions it in the intro. Like, it was a homebrewed world we played for 4+ years in a campaign. This takes place after that. You don't need any of the backstory. We introduce some of it kind of at parts, but we just know it inside and out. And one of my favorite things, as far as, I guess probably my two favorite things, is these questions, as far as it comes from like listener participation. And then also when people post things in the group about games they're running, games they've played in, stories they have, I love reading that shit. And a special shout out to Almost Hot Scott and his partner Damien, who I forward you their homebrew world. This entire
That is
yeah.
That was so sick.
That show's
Yeah.
sick.
Yep.
and I'm so jealous of like how much work they put into that. I wish we'd done the same.
In recording and capturing it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just a huge undertaking that they've gone
Maps,
through.
mythology, adventure logs, everything. And, don't expect that from everybody. But if you have like just role playing stories, if you want to talk about your games, like feel free to use any of our kind of landing pages as a jumping off point to talk about your own games, because we love that shit. So
And maps. We
love maps.
We love maps.
share maps.
You draw on those maps. Let's see them.
Hand-drawn maps,
Yep.
cured meats, hard cheeses.
That'll all make sense. Coming soon.
All right, well, that'll be it for us, and we'll at least see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Later.
What's going on? And I'm kicking the balls. I said that's entertainment. That's entertainment. Days of speed and slow time Mondays. Just now with rain on a boring Wednesday. Watching the news and not eating your tea. Freezing conflict and death on the walls. I said that's entertainment. That's entertainment.
That's nasty.